In a time when loving was a risk, ISAURA dared to dream of freedom and of the impossible love of a man who would defy everything for her. Can love truly bloom among chains? Few romances have touched as many hearts around the world as La Esclava ISAURA, the immortal work of Brazilian author Bernardo Guimarães, written in 1875. This story, now 150 years old, remains alive through its emotional strength, its message of freedom, and for having inspired the most famous Brazilian telenovela on the planet, watched in more than 130 countries. The version you are about to hear is a special adaptation, more dynamic and direct, ideal for those who wish to experience all the emotion of this classic in less time, without losing its dramatic and romantic essence. Tell us where you are listening from, and let us know in the comments how far can a heart go when it fights for its dignity. Brazil, decade of 1840. On the fertile lands of the municipality of Campos dos Goitacazes, by the banks of the Paraíba River, stood a hacienda that seemed plucked from a dream. It was vast, luminous, and of harmonious proportions, built at the foot of high hills still covered with virgin forest. The hand of man, however, had tamed the immediate wilderness, transforming it into rolling gardens, orchards overflowing with fruit, and pastures as green as emeralds, shaded here and there by centenary trees that resisted disappearing, gameleiras, cedars, and copaíbas that gave the entire place an air of majestic stillness. The main house rose imposingly, with its porch covered in climbing flowers that cascaded like perfumed waterfalls over the stone steps. The stained glass windows reflected the liquid gold of sunset, flooding the walls with light as though a sacred fire burned within. Nothing was heard except the soft murmur of the wind through the leaves and the lull of the river advancing, serene and proud, carrying reflections of the sky, not a human figure in sight, only the living language of nature in its fullness. But then, in the midst of that reverent silence, a voice began to rise from the very heart of the house. It was a gentle, feminine song, one that seemed not to come from a woman's throat but from the soul of a wounded angel. Its tone was sweet, its melody melancholic, and in its lyrics drifted the shadows of an ancient sorrow, slavery, loneliness, the impossibility of love. That voice filled the air with such profound sweetness that the trees fell silent, the birds ceased their trills, and even the river seemed to listen with a held breath. Inside the grand hall, spacious and richly decorated, sat a young woman of breathtaking beauty before a piano. Her skin, as pale as the ivory of the keys, contrasted with the gleaming black of her hair, which fell in thick waves down to cover the back of the chair. The dress she wore was modest, of simple fabric, yet it enhanced even more the slenderness of her figure and the purity of her features. She wore no jewels, save for a small jet cross suspended by a ribbon around her neck. Her fingers lingered on the keys, as though wishing to prolong, with the slightest touch, the vibration of each note. ISAURA. The name itself seemed to embody the whisper of destiny. With her eyes lost in the open window and her face bathed in the light of sunset, she remained motionless, immersed in a thought that hurt and beautified at the same time. She was the living image of a prisoner with a free soul. Behind her, silent as an elegant shadow, appeared Malvina. Still very young, dressed in the opulence only wealthy ladies could flaunt, she had blue eyes and a soft walk, marked by the security of her position. She placed her white, delicate hand on ISAURA's shoulder. "ISAURA," she said softly. The young woman turned with a slight start. "Are you here, madam? I hadn't noticed you." "I was listening from the hallway," Malvina replied with a smile. "You sing with such a beautiful voice. But ISAURA, that song, it is so sad. Why do you sing it so often?" ISAURA lowered her eyes, as though her secret weighed more than her words themselves. "Because it reminds me of someone I never knew. My mother," she whispered. "But if it displeases you, I won't sing it anymore." Malvina sighed and sat beside her. "It's not that the song bothers me, ISAURA, but I fear that whoever hears it might think you are unhappy here, that you are mistreated, when that is not the case. You have been raised as a lady. You live better than many free women. My mother-in-law, on her deathbed, asked my husband and me to care for you as a daughter, and that is what I have done." ISAURA smiled sweetly, though in her gaze shone a pain that could not be entirely hidden. "I know, madam, and I am grateful. But of what use is it to me to have learned to read, to embroider, to play the piano, if my soul is still a slave? Are you complaining about your fate? No, madam, I have no right. I only acknowledge my place." Malvina observed her intently, and a playful spark crossed her eyes. "Could it be that you are in love, ISAURA?" she said with mischief. "Is that why you sing with such melancholy?" ISAURA opened her eyes, surprised, and shook her head with a timid smile. No, madam, do not think that of me. Come now, don't deceive me. You are young, beautiful, and surely there will be those who fall in love with you. But don't worry. Tomorrow I will speak with Leoncio. It is a shame that a young woman like you should still be a slave. You will have your freedom, I promise you." ISAURA did not reply. She appreciated the gesture, but she knew there were promises that vanished with the wind. It was then that a sudden sound of hooves interrupted the conversation. The rumble of horses drew near along the main road. Both women went toward the window. "Who could it be?" Malvina murmured. ISAURA, silent, pressed her lips together. She knew that the arrival of those riders would mark the beginning of something, though she did not yet know what. And in that motionless sunset, while the wind tangled in the trees and the house remained bathed in the day's last light, destiny began to take shape. The hooves of two horses thundered over the cobblestones of the main road, raising small clouds of golden dust that the sun, still low on the horizon, illuminated delicately. Upon reaching the main entrance of the hacienda, the riders dismounted with familiarity and without ceremony. The servants did not rush to receive them. There was no need. These men were neither strangers nor visitors. They were the masters. The first, with elegant bearing, refined gestures, and an arrogant gaze, was Leoncio Almeida, Malvina's young husband. At his side, with a carefree smile and youthful air, came Henrique, her younger brother, still free of the shadows already looming over the other's life. To understand what was about to begin, it was necessary to go back in time and carefully contemplate the figure of Leoncio. Only son of the powerful Commander Almeida, Leoncio had grown up without knowing limits or denials. His childhood was a succession of indulged whims, unpunished mischief, and complacent tutors. From school to school, he passed as one who crosses a hall full of empty echoes. He never strove to learn, yet he was never failed. The surname Almeida outweighed any examination. When he reached adolescence, his parents, already worn down by moral fatigue, yielded to his next desire, to abandon medicine, to change course, to seek another destiny, one supposedly befitting his extraordinary intelligence. Thus, with a generous allowance and dreams swollen with arrogance, Leoncio was sent to Europe. Paris received him as it did so many other sons of the wealthy, with the open arms of pleasure, vanity, and illusion. In the French capital, he was not seen in libraries or classrooms, but in ballrooms, luxurious cafes, and theaters where the lights concealed decadence. Leoncio became an expert in idleness, a boulevard dandy, admired for his style, feared for his arrogance. He returned to Brazil not as an enlightened man, but as an empty fop, skilled in appearances, but hollow in soul. Disappointed, the commander urged him to find a purpose. Leoncio feigned enthusiasm for commerce, though in truth he despised anything that smelled of effort. The only transactions that interested him were those promising immediate wealth and prestige without sacrifice. His father, chastened, realized that the only way to control his excesses was to bind him to a new fortune. The marriage with Malvina, daughter of a powerful merchant and family friend, was proposed and accepted. Shortly after that rushed wedding, Leoncio's mother fell ill. She died with the same discretion with which she had lived, leaving behind a story many pretended to forget, except ISAURA. That story had begun years earlier, when the commander, a cold and womanizing man, set his eyes on a young mulatta slave, his wife's faithful maid. For months, he pursued her with threats and promises until finally, through the force and power granted by his position, he broke her. From that violence a girl was born, ISAURA. The commander's wife, a woman of kind soul and broken spirit, knew the truth. And instead of turning against the little creature who bore no guilt, she embraced her. She saw in her a consolation, a presence that eased the emptiness of never having had a daughter. ISAURA was raised as if she were one. She learned to read, to write, to play the piano and embroider, to speak French, to pray with a clean heart, to move with the grace of a lady. Her intelligence, her gentleness, her serene beauty blossomed under the loving care of that woman who called her my daughter of the soul. Leoncio never tolerated that affection. He despised it in silence, mocking what he called an old woman's whim. The commander did not approve either, though out of convenience he preferred to remain silent. He said that so much education would end up making ISAURA proud, insolent, dangerous. But the lady, stubborn in her tenderness, began to speak of wills, of freedom, of guarantees for the young woman's future. Her husband and son, complicit, postponed again and again the drafting of the document, and then without warning death came to claim her. A sudden stroke silenced forever her intentions. ISAURA wept bitterly for the only person who had loved her unconditionally. Malvina moved, promised to continue caring for her as her protector had done. But affections were not contracts, and promises were not signed papers. ISAURA remained in the house, playing the piano that once belonged to her mistress, reading the books she had been given, dressing simply, obeying with grace. Malvina offered her sincere affection, but she could not shield her from the world. And in that house, now ruled by Leoncio, and his ambition disguised as elegance, freedom was a fragile word, hanging by an invisible thread. The hacienda remained quiet under the soft light of dusk, but a new shadow settled upon its walls. A shadow from the past that would soon touch ISAURA's heart. Enrique had just turned 20. He was a handsome young man with a lively gaze and refined manners, the kind of youth the world flatters without him having done much to deserve it. Frivolous in his thoughts, hasty in his judgments, and enamored with himself, he did not escape the common flaws of those born surrounded by privilege. Yet in his chest beat a noble heart, capable of indignation at injustice and of being moved by the pain of others. That summer, taking advantage of his medical school vacation, he accepted his brother-in-law's invitation to spend a few days at the hacienda. Leoncio, who had gone to the town of Campos to receive him, accompanied him on the return. During the journey, the subject of conversation, again and again, circled back to the same. ISAURA. "You must see her, Enrique," said Leoncio with a dark gleam in his eyes. "Never in Paris, nor in Cadiz, nor in Naples have I seen a creature so beautiful. She is a jewel. And the most surprising thing, she is a slave." Enrique looked at him with bewilderment. He felt uneasy about such unrestrained enthusiasm for a woman living under the same roof as his sister, but he said nothing. Leoncio continued, "She was educated like a princess. She speaks French, plays the piano, embroiders like the convent nuns. My mother adored her. My wife insists I should grant her freedom, but tell me, what sensible man would let go of such a treasure?" Enrique lowered his gaze, uncomfortable. He did not share that utilitarian vision, but a part of him began to feel a curiosity he could hardly explain. The next morning, the salon was bathed in the golden light streaming through the tall windows. ISAURA, seated by the window, embroidered in silence. She wore a modest light blue dress that enhanced her delicate complexion. Her hair, simply gathered, revealed the soft line of her neck and her clear forehead. Her hands moved over the fabric with the precision of one who had learned patience from a very young age. Enrique and Leoncio stopped at the threshold. She had not noticed them. "There she is," whispered Leoncio with satisfaction. "Does she not look like a living work of art?" Enrique nodded, mesmerized. "She is neither Andalusian nor Parisian. She is a perfect Brazilian," he said with wonder. "And that is why I have no intention of freeing her," added Leoncio. What sense would there be in having raised her as a lady only to let her go as if she were anyone? Enrique frowned. Having her here, so close to your wife, so exposed. It isn't proper, Leoncio, you know it. Leoncio shrugged with irony. Isaura is like one of my Venetian mirrors. Am I supposed to hide them in the kitchen? At that moment, Malvina entered the salon, fresh as an April flower. Her laughter was clear, her joy contagious. Good morning, you lazy gentleman. At last you wake up. You look radiant today, my dear, said Leoncio. What good omen has visited you? I am happy, and I want this day to be one of celebration, she replied. And you, Leoncio, owe me a promise, one you have been postponing for far too long. Promise? Which one? He asked, feigning ignorance. You know perfectly well which one. Isaura's freedom. Today, I want you to keep your word. Leoncio let out a dry laugh. To speak of that here now in front of her, that hardly seems... Then let's go inside, said Malvina, taking his hand. Enrique, wait here. I'll go order the coffee. When Isaura noticed his presence, she tried to withdraw, but Enrique stopped her with a gesture. What do you wish, sir? She asked, her gaze lowered. I want to speak with you, he answered, approaching. Do not be afraid. He looked at her without disguise. There was in her a serene dignity that disarmed him. For an instant he hesitated. Then, with awkwardness disguised as gallantry, he took her hand. You cannot imagine how enchanting you are. It is an injustice that a woman like you should still be a slave. Isaura gently withdrew her hand. If that is all you had to tell me, allow me to leave. Wait, listen to me. I could convince Leoncio to grant you freedom. You could have everything, dresses, jewels, servants, and my love. I would make you a queen. Isaura looked at him coldly. That would make anyone lose their senses, sir, but I prefer to keep my composure. Save your promises for someone who desires them. Enrique persisted, cornered by a desire he did not fully understand. He tried to embrace her. Isaura stepped back firmly. Señor Enrique, I demand that you leave me in peace. A kiss. Just one, Isaura. If you continue, I will cry out louder. I will not tolerate more insinuations. How haughty you become, he muttered, frustrated. You seem like a great lady. Enough! Wasn't it bad enough with Señor Leoncio? Now you as well. Those words stopped him in his tracks. Leoncio too? What are you saying? I reject both you and him alike. At that instant, a sarcastic laugh shattered the tension. Leoncio stood at the threshold, arms crossed, a smile of ice on his lips. Bravo! What a way to put your lessons in morality into practice, brother-in-law, he said with contempt. Courting my slave in your sister's salon. Very elegant. Enrique, flushed with fury, took a step toward him but restrained himself. How curious, he said with irony. You seem more jealous over her than over your own wife. My sister does not deserve this. What are you insinuating? What you just heard, and I warn you I will not remain silent. Careful with what you say. I have nothing more to say. I am leaving. It would be beneath me to quarrel with you over a slave. Enrique left with firm steps, while Isaura, trembling, sought refuge in a corner of the salon. Leoncio remained motionless, furious, his pride wounded. He did not care about provoking his brother-in-law's anger, but he feared having exposed his intentions. The possibility that Malvina might know unsettled him. Isaura watched him with a heavy heart. In her gaze mingled fear, guilt, and the certainty that her recklessness had lit a spark that, at any moment, could turn into a fire. She was the jewel in dispute, but also the prey, and though she did not yet know the cost, she already sensed she would pay the highest price. The light had faded from the salon, but the air still carried the echo of words that cut like knives. Isaura, trembling, remained in the same corner where she had taken refuge, wishing with all her soul that her master would not notice her presence. But fate, always cruel to the purest hearts, granted her no such mercy. Still here? You did well, said Leoncio when he saw her, with a cold smile that never reached his eyes. Isaura shuddered. She wanted to respond, but her voice would not obey. The silence of her soul was more eloquent than any words. From what I see, he continued, drawing closer with deliberately measured steps, you have become quite advanced in matters of love. You were listening to that boy's compliments with a very pleased attention. ISAURA lifted her face just enough to look at him with seriousness. As much as I listened to yours, sir, she replied with the dignity of one whose only shield is truth, for I have no other choice. Leoncio frowned. A slave who dares to look with love at her masters deserves to be severely punished. I have not, she whispered. I am not the one who seeks those glances. Leoncio stopped a short distance away, his expression no longer ironic but dark. Did you say anything to Henrique, ISAURA? I? No, sir. Nothing that could offend him or you. Are you sure? I swear it, she stammered, swallowing the knot forming in her throat. He observed her in silence for a few moments, as if weighing the truth of every word she spoke. Be careful, ISAURA. Until now, I have endured your refusals with patience, but I will not accept that under my roof, and nearly before my very eyes, you lend an ear to anyone's courting, and much less that you reveal what happens here inside. ISAURA lowered her gaze, but not from submission. It was fear that held her head bowed. I do not desire your love, sir, but neither do I deserve your hatred. Leoncio turned sharply. His voice grew harsher. Perhaps it will be necessary to banish you from this house, to take you to a place where no one else will see you or desire you. For what? For what, sir? She managed to say, but he was already moving away. Enough. He cut her off without looking at her. It is not convenient that we be found speaking alone. I will hear you another time. And muttering under his breath about Henrique, about Malvina, and about his own mistake in having brought him, he left with hurried steps. ISAURA was left alone, motionless, feeling the air grow heavier around her. Her body trembled, but not from cold. The threat of banishment was less terrifying than what she sensed might come after. May God never allow such a day to arrive, she thought with a constricted heart. Loneliness fell upon her like a starless night. Her mind, besieged by memories, dragged her toward an ancient pain, almost forgotten but still alive. That of her mother. That gentle, strong woman who, according to the old slaves, had suffered the worst of humiliations. She knew that story. She had heard it whispered with fear and reverence, as one might invoke an evil still haunting the earth. Her mother had been a victim of the same lineage, and would she meet the same fate? ISAURA pressed her hands to her chest. She did not know how to defend herself, nor to whom she could turn. She had considered the possibility of telling Malvina everything, to confess it all without reserve. The truth might save her, but her heart forbade it. Loving her mistress was as natural as breathing. How could she drive a dagger of disillusion into her heart? How could she destroy with a single confession the delicate and sweet world in which Malvina lived? How could she turn into shadow the clear sky of her innocence? She preferred silence. She preferred to burn quietly, as her mother had. To die, if need be, but not be the cause of sorrow for the one who had given her so much. She thought then of her father, a poor man, simple with no power beyond his affection and his honesty. She could not go to him. He could not protect her from Leoncio or his threats, and she knew it. Thus, with no other weapons than her dignity, ISAURA withdrew to her chamber. She closed the door slowly, sank to her knees beside the bed and burst into tears. She wept soundlessly, as one weeps when there is no hope of human comfort. Only heaven remained to her, the only judge Leoncio could not deceive. Her sad song, the one that so unsettled Malvina, began to take on its true meaning. It was not the sorrow of an impossible love, nor the lament of a heart wounded by disdain. It was the muffled cry of one trapped in a gilded cage, with no chains in sight, but with a soul in captivity. For ISAURA was not in love. Her heart remained pure, intact, untouched by passion, yet wounded by fear. Her gentleness was real, but beneath that tenderness lived a broken soul, sustained by a will not yet crushed. And in that silence, amid the night that was already falling over the hacienda, ISAURA understood that her greatest sin was to be too beautiful and too good for the world to which she belonged. Still with her heart pounding in her chest and her mind wrapped in fog, ISAURA took up her needlework and prepared to leave the salon in silence. She longed to hide. She wished no one else would see her. She dreamed of finding some corner among the lemon trees or the jasmine of the orchard where, at last, she might breathe in peace. But fate, ever mocking of the innocent, had one more scene reserved for her. She had barely crossed halfway through the salon when an unexpected figure appeared before her. It was Belchior, the old gardener of the hacienda. His hunched, grotesque silhouette made him seem more like a creature from a tale than a man of flesh and bone. He had a large head, a back curved like a hill, and a clumsy gait, as though each step had to ask permission of the tiles beneath it. Yet, in his trembling, soil-stained hands, he carried a bouquet of flowers so large it nearly covered his face. "Good heavens," murmured ISAURA upon seeing him. "What more could happen to me today?" "Senora ISAURA," stammered Belchior awkwardly, "I brought this for you." ISAURA could not help but smile, not from joy, but from the absurdity of the situation. The gardener, with all his deformity and candor, awakened in her neither fear nor disgust, only a resigned compassion. "Senora, me?" she said, trying to maintain composure. "Are you also mocking me, Belchior?" "God forbid. I would never mock you. May I fall dead if ever I disrespect you. I came to bring you these flowers, though you yourself are the loveliest flower in the garden." ISAURA shook her head, no longer knowing whether to laugh or cry. "Do not say such things to me, Señor Belchior. I am a slave, Doña Malvina's slave, not a lady. You may be whatever they call you, but in my heart you are a queen. I, ISAURA, I have saved money, more than 500 cruzados. If you accept me, I can buy your freedom, marry you. We would be happy. You would no longer have to serve anyone." ISAURA lowered her gaze. She wanted to answer gently, but her soul was too weary for tenderness. "I am grateful for your intentions, but it is useless. My masters would not sell me for anything in the world." "Wretches, to keep the Queen of Beauty in chains," said Belchior, his eyes wet. "But it does not matter. I would rather be your slave than lord over 100,000 men. I think of you when I water the flowers. I dream of you when night falls." And suddenly he fell to his knees before her. His hands trembled, his voice broke like a dry leaf. ISAURA, alarmed, looked around. "Please get up, what are you doing? If someone sees you—" "Oh, Senor Belchior, go now, please go!" But it was too late. From one end of the salon, Leoncio emerged from behind the curtains, his dark gaze fixed upon them both. From the corridor, Enrique and Malvina had witnessed the scene. She clutched her brother's arm, her face ashen, her eyes brimming. Leoncio was the first to speak. "Oh, well, I see I have in my house an idol before whom everyone kneels, even the gardener." Belchior jumped to his feet, trembling. "Sir, I was only bringing these flowers for the vases, and since when are flowers delivered on one's knees?" snapped Leoncio sharply. "If you ever play out that farce again, I'll have you thrown out of the hacienda." Belchior, confused, stumbled over the chairs as he tried to flee. ISAURA, motionless, dared not move, but the worst was yet to come. Leoncio, noting the other's absence, approached ISAURA with an expression he tried to disguise as tenderness. His voice shifted, soft, sweet, dangerous. "ISAURA, my ISAURA." He did not finish the phrase. A stifled cry stopped him. Malvina, in the doorway, leaning on Enrique's shoulder, was pale as a funeral veil. "Now I understand everything," she whispered, before collapsing. Enrique caught her firmly. She, through sobs, covered her face and ran to lock herself in her room. ISAURA trembled. Leoncio, paralyzed, did not know what to say. Enrique left without a word. ISAURA fled to the garden, like a wounded bird seeking shelter in the branches. She wished to disappear among the orange trees, to lose herself in the perfume of the flowers that do not judge or ask. She could bear no more. 3 men in less than a day had suffocated her with their intentions. She was no longer a woman. She was a trophy, a possession, an object. Meanwhile, Leoncio wandered furiously about the salon. He could not bear the ridicule. He would not accept having been exposed. He blamed Enrique, ISAURA, destiny itself. He wavered between rage and humiliation. When the hour of lunch arrived, the table was set. Yet he ate alone. He ordered Malvina to come, but she, locked in her chamber, claimed indisposition. He was on the verge of overturning the table, of shouting, of breaking everything. But he restrained himself. He decided he would not surrender control. He would feign indifference. He would pretend nothing mattered. That afternoon, he mounted his horse and rode through the coffee fields. At dusk, he returned as if nothing had happened. He dined, reclined on the sofa in the salon, and lit a cigar with the utmost nonchalance. Enrique returned at nightfall. He searched the house until he found his sister in her room. She was undone, pale, her eyes swollen from weeping. "Where were you, Enrique? I was desperate to see you." "Alone. Were you not in the company of your perfect husband? Do not speak to me of him. I was blind. Now I know it is worse to be accompanied by someone without a soul. At last you see it. Enrique, I want to confront him. Now I need to. Do you want me to go with you?" "Yes. I cannot do it alone. I'm afraid of him, and of what he might say." Enrique offered her his arm. "Then let's go. I'll make him listen. And if he dares raise his voice at you, he will know what it means to face an angry brother." And thus, the two made their way to the salon, where the truth, like an unsheathed sword, was already waiting for them. The atmosphere of the salon was dense and heavy, as though the very walls had absorbed the tensions of the previous days. The afternoon breeze barely stirred the light linen curtains hanging from the tall windows. Leoncio, seemingly unconcerned, reclined on a sofa, slowly smoking his cigar, surrounded by that silence which precedes storms. His face, framed by the golden light of sunset, displayed a feigned calm, almost provocative. Malvina entered with a firm step, bearing the carriage of a lady who asked no permission and tolerated no evasions. In her eyes burned a new determination, different from her usual gentleness. Without stopping, she stood firmly before her husband. "Señor Leoncio," she said, her voice controlled yet vibrant, "I wish to speak a few words to you, if it does not trouble you." He sat up quickly, as though that firm tone did not disturb him in the least. "I'm always at your service, dear Malvina," he answered with a twisted smile, never abandoning his condescending tone. "Do not call me that," she exclaimed coldly. "I have come to tell you that you have insulted me and betrayed me in this house, in the most unworthy and disloyal way." Leoncio frowned, but did not abandon his role of the innocent, surprised man. "What are you saying, Malvina? I do not understand a single word." "Do not feign surprise. You know perfectly well why I confront you. I should have guessed it long ago. You have changed with me, you look at me with distance, you touch me without soul. And now everything makes sense. Ah, my heart, did you really believe that the honeymoon would last forever? That would be monotonous, don't you think? The slap never materialized, but her eyes struck him with a fury that burned his cheeks. And still you dare to mock me. What baseness, what shame for us both. Leoncio tried to take her hand, but she pulled it away with a sharp gesture. "Leave me. Do not touch me. I am here to tell you that I cannot, nor will I, share this roof with a woman whom you have looked upon as if she were your wife or something worse. So decide, either her or me. Today, this very moment." For an instant he seemed disarmed. He lowered his gaze, drew a breath, and responded with measured voice. "Malvina, you are being unfair. You know that I have considered ISAURA's freedom, but it is not in my hands. She still belongs legally to my father." "What a miserable excuse," Malvina exclaimed, disappointment burning in her eyes. "Your father gave you this hacienda and all its slaves. You already have the power to decide, but if you prefer that slave over me—" "Malvina, do not say that. Do not blaspheme." "Blasphemy or not," she retorted, "I demand you give her a fate. Sell her, free her, hide her, but I will no longer have her in my service. She's far too beautiful for a maid." From a corner of the room, Enrique, until then a silent witness, stepped forward. His face showed a mix of shame and resolve. "You see, Senor Leoncio, I warned you. These are the consequences of filling your house with luxury trinkets, as you call them." Leoncio turned to him, eyes blazing. "These trinkets would not be dangerous if there were no meddlers who disturb the peace of another man's home for personal gain." "That is enough," roared Enrique. "I involved myself to keep your so-called luxury trinket from passing from the salon to your bedroom. I could not sit idly by while my sister was dishonored." Leoncio advanced toward him, fist clenched, stiff with rage. But Malvina stepped between them. "Enough, both of you. This dispute is useless and degrading. I have said what I needed to say. If Leoncio wishes to be an honorable man, let him prove it. If not, he already knows what awaits him." Leoncio, still glaring, opened his mouth to reply, but a grave and steady voice resounded from the porch. "Good afternoon. May I enter?" Leoncio exhaled in relief. An interruption at last. Without thinking of who it was, he replied, "Come in. This house is open." But his relief was short-lived. Through the doorway appeared Miguel, the hacienda's former overseer and ISAURA's father. He carried with him the silent nobility of one who has labored with his soul, the dignity of a man who has made himself. His clothing was modest yet impeccable, and his eyes shone with calm resolve. "Senor Leoncio," he said after greeting those present, "I have come to settle a simple matter, and I believe it can be heard here before these people who seem trustworthy." "Of course," said Leoncio, still not fully recognizing him. Miguel drew from his coat a worn leather wallet and held it out firmly. "Here is the sum your father demanded for ISAURA's freedom. 10 contos de reis, complete. Every coin earned with work and dignity." Leoncio froze. He took the wallet with tense hands and without a word began to count the bills. He did so slowly, as though each note stripped away a piece of his soul. It was not out of exactness, but to gain time. Meanwhile, in narrative voice, Miguel's past is revealed. The son of exiled Portuguese politicians, an educated man, respected, gardener of the hacienda for many years. He had been unjustly dismissed after trying to protect ISAURA's mother. From then on, he lived with the single goal of gathering the money to free his daughter, working without rest, sacrificing everything for love. When Leoncio finished counting, he raised his eyes with disdain. 10 contos, the exact amount. But ISAURA does not belong to me. Legally, her master is still my father, and I have no authority to dispose of her. You are his only son, his heir, Miguel replied calmly, and you can send him the money. He was the one who gave his word. You need only fulfill it. Malvina stepped closer, her gaze sharp. There are no excuses, Leoncio. Write to your father. Right now. It is the least you can do. Defeated by circumstance, Leoncio went to the desk. He took up paper and pen. His fingers, once so steady, now trembled slightly. The whole room held its breath. At that moment, ISAURA entered quietly. She approached Miguel without the others noticing. The old man, seeing her, smiled tenderly. "My child, I came for you." "My freedom?" she whispered. "Your freedom, at last. As it should be, with my hands, not with false promises." ISAURA moved, kissed his hands and rested her forehead against his chest. "My father, only from you could I receive this gift. Only from you." While the reunion between father and daughter moved in silence, Leoncio muttered inaudible words before the paper. Suddenly, a knock at the door. A servant entered hurriedly, carrying an envelope. "A letter, sir," marked in mourning. Leoncio took it, paled, and opened it with trembling fingers. He read in silence, his eyes running over the lines with mounting dread. He collapsed into the chair as though the weight of the world had fallen upon him. The envelope slipped from his hand. Malvina picked it up and read aloud, her voice trembling. "Leoncio, I regret to inform you that your father has died. A sudden cerebral stroke claimed his life the day before yesterday. Please accept our deepest condolences." Silence was absolute. Malvina, moved, forgot the offenses and threw herself into her husband's arms. He, broken by the news, offered no resistance. They wept together, each wounded by a different grief. ISAURA clung to Miguel. "Father, All is lost. No, daughter, he whispered. God has not yet spoken the last word, and while there is faith, there is still hope. At the far north of the hacienda, apart from the big house and flanked by ancient trees, stood a long, rudimentary hall built from rough planks without flooring or ceiling. The palm-thatched roof sagged slightly in the center, and the walls seemed to breathe the heat and humidity of midday. There was no luxury or ornament there, only a few windows without glass, protected by wooden balusters that looked out onto the inner courtyard. Inside, the air was thick with the harsh scent of unspun cotton and the breath of many mouths whispering among distaffs, spindles, and spinning wheels. 30 women, dark-skinned and weary of heart, sat lined on wooden benches, some with babies asleep at their breasts, others with little ones crawling at their feet. They hummed monotonously to ward off the tedium of endless labor. There were faces weathered by time and resignation, elderly women with dimmed eyes and lips sealed by silence. But there were also young ones with lively gazes, bodies that still dreamed of freedom. Among them, one figure stood out like a star among coals. Rosa, a slender mulatta, agile of body and provocative of face. Her short curly hair framed mischievous eyes, full of restless defiance. If not for the sheerness of her blouse and the haughty sparkle in her gaze, one might have mistaken her for a mischievous boy. Rosa did not work with reluctance, but her mind seemed occupied with other things, comparing, observing, calculating. Now that the old master is dead, murmured one of the oldest slaves, and Doña Malvina has left with her brother, we shall soon see what it means to suffer. Tia Joaquina? Do you really believe that? Asked a young woman as she untangled the wool. Ah, daughters, what comes will be worse. This Señor Leoncio has no soul. The other, with all his temper, still respected certain limits. But this one wants coffee, more coffee, and only coffee. He'll drag us from the looms and put us under the sun, with the overseer's cane marking our pace. God deliver us, murmured another. Would it not be better to die at once? All is bondage, my child, replied Joaquina, her eyes clouded with memory. To be born a slave to a cruel master is a sentence without escape. Look at what became of poor Juliana, Isaura's mother. And what of Isaura now that Doña Malvina is gone? Asked another. Once she moved among cushions and white dresses. Now, interrupted Rosa with a twisted smile, she plays the lady's part. Hush, girl, snapped Tia Joaquina. What do you know of that poor soul? May God spare you her fate. Oh, Tia, don't be so naive. Isaura thinks herself better than us. And now, since her father is supposed to buy her freedom, she fancies herself a grand lady. Do you know what her mother was? A martyr? And you mock her daughter? If you had been in her place, with that temper of yours, you'd already be dead. Rosa sneered in contempt but said no more. The hum of the spinning wheels continued, and the chant of the slaves once more filled the space, until a harsh voice thundered through the hall. Silence, you drones! It seems your tongues do more work than your hands. The overseer Francisco, a man with a square build, black beard and hard gaze, entered, followed by the page André, a young man of elegant figure and impeccable dress. Together, they placed a new spinning wheel in the space beside Rosa. Shortly after, Isaura entered. The women rose and sought the overseer's blessing. He, without pause, pointed to the wheel just set down. Here is your place, Isaura. From today, this will be your station. The master wills it so. This is not a piano. Here one comes to work. Isaura spoke no word. She bowed with dignity and took her seat. There was no trace of pride in her face, only serene acceptance. Her hands prepared the thread skillfully, and though her eyes shone with melancholy, her bearing was that of a queen without a throne. Her modest dress could not hide the natural grace with which she moved. She did not look like a slave. She looked like a lady playing at mingling with the spinners. All watched her, some with compassion, others with envy, and Rosa, with pure hatred. Poor Isaura, Rosa whispered with sarcasm. From the salon to the stocks, from the piano to the wheel. Why say that? Isaura answered with a tired smile. "I am where I must be." "And why did Doña Malvina not take you with her? Were you not her jewel?" "She left with her brother. I had no reason to go." "Oh, Isaura, you cannot fool me. You thought you could compete with the white ladies, and look at you now. If you expect me to be offended, you will not succeed," said Isaura calmly. "I work like any other, and if today I sit here, tomorrow it may be you in my place." The bell rang. It was time for the midday meal. The women set aside their work. Isaura remained seated, slowly turning the wheel. "Aren't you going to eat?" Rosa asked. "I am not hungry. I prefer to go on with my task." "Of course. Fine ladies don't eat from the pot." "Silence, venomous child," interjected Tia Joaquina. "Let her work in peace." One by one, the slaves left the hall. Isaura stayed alone. The wheel turned beneath her bare foot while her mind sailed through silent storms. She thought of her beauty, how much it had condemned her. If she had been plain, if her skin had not shone, if her voice did not enchant, perhaps she would have been free in her heart. But no. Her face, her body, her gentleness, all were magnets for the gazes that pursued her. Andre entered, well-dressed, perfumed with cologne, carrying himself like a conqueror. "Good afternoon, lovely Isaura. How fares that flower?" "Well, thank you. Locked here between these dark walls. This is no place for you. You deserve carpets and golden mirrors. Have you come to mock me as well?" "No. I came because I like you. If you would just—" "I would not, Andre. Not now, not ever." He tried to touch her. Isaura drew back, her face aflame. "Stay away. And if you dare again, I will speak to your master. Do not be cruel. But fine, I will go." He left, grumbling, muttering that Leoncio desired the same as he. Isaura froze. 3 men desired her as an object. One was her master, another a servant, the third a grotesque old man. Rosa hated her for simply being who she was, and she only longed for peace. At that moment, Leoncio crossed the threshold. Isaura, absorbed, had not seen him arrive. "Where are the spinners?" he asked Francisco. "They went to eat, sir." "Good. Let them not return. Starting tomorrow, they will go to the coffee fields. Here they only waste time." When the overseer left, Leoncio approached with purposeful steps. Isaura raised her gaze, and she knew the worst part of the day had begun. The big house was sunk in a silence that was not mourning, but restrained tension. The corridors, once alive with voices and footsteps, now seemed empty of soul, as though the wind, slipping through the columns, carried with it the last sighs of an era that had just ended. The news of Commander Almeida's death had exploded like a grenade in the midst of the domestic conflict, shifting the axis of all disputes with the brutality of definitive events. From that moment on, Leoncio became the absolute master of the fortune and of the fate of all who lived on the hacienda. His father's passing left him not only material inheritance, but also complete freedom to impose his will without restraint, without uncomfortable witnesses, without authority to limit him. The last moral bonds, those that had still held him back in his unholy desire for Isaura, dissolved into the air with the dust of mourning. For several days, Leoncio and Malvina shut themselves in the house, fulfilling the duty of mourning. A silent truce seemed to establish itself between them, as though death imposed a temporary pact of respect. Enrique, who had everything arranged for his departure, yielded to his sister's pleas and stayed a little longer. "Depending on my husband's behavior," Malvina had told him, "we will leave together. But if in these days he does not give Isaura her freedom, I will not remain another hour under this roof." Malvina still believed in the possibility of redemption. She imagined that pain, emptiness, and the confrontation with death would awaken her husband's dormant conscience. She hoped that Leoncio, struck by loss, would seek refuge in repentance and reconcile himself with the principles he once pretended to hold. But Leoncio did not mourn his father. Deep down, he rejoiced. With his father's departure, a door closed that had kept him partially under watch for years. He feigned affliction. He locked himself in his chambers. He refused words, visits, conversations, but he did not reflect on filial love nor on the brevity of life. He thought instead of how to keep ISAURA at any cost. In the darkness of his room, he plotted strategies to bypass promises, break commitments, and crush scruples. His father's pledge to Miguel, his late mother's will, the money already paid. None of it mattered. All could be ignored, denied, twisted to his favor. When Malvina, believing the days of seclusion had sown some humanity in him, dared raise the matter again, she found only a mask of coldness. "We have time, Malvina," he said calmly. "First I must make an inventory, travel to court, settle the succession papers. When I return, we will see what to do with ISAURA." Malvina's gaze drifted into the void. In her eyes, the disillusion was so sharp it pained to see. "Do you still hesitate to fulfill your duty?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "Do you know how much your mother loved her? Do you know it was her wish that ISAURA be free? Do you know your father promised it, and that Miguel brought every last cent? And even so, you allow yourself to doubt." Leoncio drew a melancholy, calculated smile. "And what do we gain by rushing? ISAURA is well here. She lacks nothing. Would her freedom serve her now, alone, without protection?" "She has her father," Malvina retorted with force. "A dignified man who has sacrificed everything for her. Give him back his daughter." "And with what means?" Leoncio inquired with disdain. "That poor wretch must have indebted himself to the bone. How will he guarantee ISAURA's happiness?" Malvina no longer replied. She simply turned and withdrew with dignity, but in her heart, the crack was widening into an abyss. The next day, without announcing it to anyone, she ordered her things prepared. She bade the servants farewell with a whisper and departed with Henrique for Rio de Janeiro. Leoncio watched her go from the porch, smoking with feigned indifference. He did not lift a finger, he did not say a word, but in his chest burned a dark joy. ISAURA, meanwhile, was a shadow wandering the hacienda. Since hearing the letter announcing the commander's death, something in her had broken. Hope, barely born, had withered instantly. The future closed again like a cage. She knew Leoncio would never let her go. She knew she was alone. She sought refuge among the trees, in the corners of the garden, like a wounded animal sensing the hunter's approach. She scarcely dared look at Malvina, and when she did, she found a strange, distant expression. The lady who had embraced her with tenderness for years now turned her gaze away. Rosa, who had become her new attendant, wasted no time in poisoning Malvina's wounded soul with her insinuations. "That girl is not what she seems, my lady," she whispered in confidence. "She always pretended to be submissive, but it is she who has driven the master mad. That innocent face is pure deceit." Malvina, fragile inside, began to believe. The love she felt for her husband turned into jealousy, clouded her judgment. She began to avoid ISAURA, to answer her coldly, to look at her harshly. ISAURA, desperate, tried to approach her. She wanted to explain, to plead, to defend herself. But every attempt was rejected with a curt gesture. At last, she kept silent. She withdrew within herself, like a flower closing to avoid being trampled. Even so, while Malvina remained in the house, her mere presence was a shield. Leoncio, though full of longing, dared not cross certain lines. But the day Malvina left, ISAURA knew something irreparable had happened. That very afternoon, Leoncio prowled the house with slow, deliberate steps. He sought ISAURA through corridors, gardens, and chambers. He found her in a dark alcove, curled in a corner, her face bathed in tears. "ISAURA," he murmured sweetly, "do not fear. I have not come to harm you." He knelt before her. He spoke of love, of protection, of the future. He offered her jewels, freedom, a house, a life without fear. Leoncio spoke as though desire were virtue, as though his diseased ambition could be justified with soft words. But ISAURA, though trembling, did not yield. She looked him in the eye and answered firmly, "I would rather die first, sir, than become what you desire." He rose abruptly. His face, once enchanted, twisted with rage. He left without replying, muttering threats, and he fulfilled them. That very day, ISAURA was sent to the Hall of the Spinners. as just another, as punishment, as warning. Leoncio had not finished. His plan had only begun. If she continued to resist, he would send her to the coffee fields. If she still refused, to the whipping post. And if even then she defied him, he would bury her under his power. ISAURA knew it, but she also knew that her soul did not belong to him, and that, to her, was freedom, even if it hurt, even if it cost her life. The afternoon slowly fell upon the hacienda, tinting the corridors with a melancholy gold that slipped through the open latticework and painted broken shadows across the stone floor. The air was thick, as if holding the tension of something imminent. In the garden trees, not even the birds dared to sing. Leoncio wandered the house with restless steps, feigning interest in reorganizing the domestic service, now that, as he claimed, all administration lay exclusively in his hands. But his gaze did not linger on the servants or the dusty corners. He sought only one figure, one face, a pair of eyes that refused to meet his own. From one of the windows overlooking the patio, he saw the spinner slaves filing toward the kitchen. One after another they vanished between the columns until the last disappeared through the door, but he noticed an absence. She was not among them. ISAURA was not there. A twisted smile spread across his lips. The moment had come. He recalled with satisfaction that he himself had ordered the overseer to send the spinners to the coffee fields that afternoon. Everything had been carefully arranged. Now, at last, she was his alone, without witnesses, without obstacles. He entered the spinning hall with the stealth of a hunter approaching his prey. ISAURA, seated by her wheel, did not see him arrive. Her fingers continued their work, while her thoughts seemed far away, perhaps in a world where consolation still existed. "ISAURA," he said softly, almost affectionately. She started but did not raise her eyes. "Señor," she replied respectfully without stopping her hands, "I want you to know that now your fate lies completely in my hands. My father is dead, my wife has abandoned me. I am the sole master of this house." ISAURA slowly lowered her gaze. Her fingers ceased their spinning. "You always have been, Señor, but now more than ever. You have nowhere to turn, no one to intercede for you. And yet I have not come to impose anything," he continued, drawing near with feigned tenderness. "I have come to offer you a different life. You can be free, ISAURA, free and happy, if only you consent to give me a little of your affection. I do not ask you to love me, only that you do not reject me." ISAURA rose slowly, her hands folded across her apron. She looked at him with a mixture of serenity and sorrow. "My lord, I beg you, for the memory of your wife, for the memory of your mother, do not press this matter further. I am nothing but a slave. My duty is to obey in all, save in what would compromise my soul." "And what do you know of souls?" Leoncio retorted, losing his calm. "You have lived with privileges that are not yours. You have received education, care, clothing, and now you scorn me who loves you more than my very life. Your affection may honor me, but I do not desire it. I cannot receive it without betraying the one who gave me true kindness. I would not be worthy to call myself woman if I accepted being the cause of Doña Malvina's sorrow." A flash of fury burned in Leoncio's eyes. "Enough of that name. Malvina has abandoned me. I need her no longer. I want only you. You are mine, ISAURA, by right, by power, by desire. You may chain my body, Señor, but you will never command my heart." The young woman's words, trembling yet unwavering, struck his pride like a blow. Leoncio stepped back, choking down the rage swelling in his chest. He turned abruptly and pulled the whistle from his belt. He blew it violently. Seconds later, André, the page, appeared, breathless. "Bring the stocks and the chains with locks," he ordered coldly. André's eyes widened in horror. "This very moment, Señor. Now, obey." ISAURA fell to her knees, her trembling hands outstretched toward him. "Mercy, do not punish me so. I will work at whatever you command. I will endure fatigue and humiliation, but do not subject me to that shame. For your mother's soul, Señor, do not do it. You have brought this upon yourself. If you cannot be mine through love, you shall be through fear." ISAURA wept, leaning against the stool of the spinning wheel, when Andrei returned with the chains and the heavy wooden stocks. He set them on a bench with trembling hands and left without a word. "You have until tonight to decide," Leoncio said, fixing his gaze on the instruments of torment. "Choose between my love or my hatred." When she was alone, ISAURA knelt before the spinning wheel, her eyes fixed on the chains. Her body trembled, but her soul stood tall. She joined her hands and, through tears, began to pray. "Holy Mother, you who know my heart, you who know I have done no wrong, protect me, give me strength. Do not allow the only thing I still keep, my dignity, to be stained." At that moment, the door opened quietly. An older, stooped figure crossed the threshold with silent steps. It was Miguel, her father. "Father!" ISAURA cried when she saw him. "Father, look what they mean to do to me." Miguel wrapped his arms around her and held her as she wept against his chest. "My daughter, there is no more time. We cannot wait any longer." "Father, I can bear no more. They humiliate me, they hunt me. Is there no justice in this world? Justice will not come from this house," he whispered, stroking her hair. "That is why we must flee. Everything is ready. The money he refused for your freedom will now serve to save you." "Flee? How?" "A canoe awaits us at the river. A captain friend will carry us on his ship northward. In a few hours we will be far from here. It is dangerous, but it is our only way." "Yes, yes, Father. Let us go now. Even if it is toward the unknown, I fear nothing anymore. Take this shawl. Cover yourself. Go through the patio, through the shadows. I will leave by the back way and meet you at the river. Heaven has opened this door for us. We must not let it close." ISAURA embraced him once more, with the desperation of one clinging to what she may never touch again, and left in silence, merging with the dusk. Minutes later, Miguel reached the riverbank. ISAURA was already waiting, her face pale but resolute. They climbed into the canoe together. The old boatman pushed hard against the current. The river, silent accomplice, received them without a ripple, and the hacienda receded behind them, a shadow shrinking upon the water, while ISAURA's heart, caught between fear and hope, began at last to beat with freedom. More than 2 months had passed since that silent dawn when ISAURA's frail figure, accompanied by her father, vanished into the shadow of the waters. Since then, Leoncio had not known rest. Driven by a diseased obsession, he unleashed a true manhunt that crossed provinces, towns, and roads, deploying spies, officers, and messengers as though he were not searching for a fugitive slave, but for a treasure stolen from his soul and pride. While that feverish search burned in the south, in the north of the country, the city of Recife, majestic and serene in its tropical beauty, was preparing for a night of festivity. The sea breeze caressed the canals like a faithful lover, and the gleaming light of the chandeliers shimmered on the water like constellations trapped on earth. A gala night opened the doors of one of the city's most distinguished salons, where the most select society gathered amid the perfume of gardenias, the murmur of fans, and the first chords of the waltz. In an adjoining room, before the bustle of the dance floor, a group of young gentlemen conversed animatedly. They were dressed with the care of men who knew that love could appear in any corner, in any glance. "She is more than a woman," said Alvaro, his voice brimming with enthusiasm. "She is an apparition, a vision that does not belong to this world. She bears the name of a queen, Elvira, and though she lives modestly, her bearing denies all humility. I would call her a princess in exile." "A princess?" replied one of his friends, Dr. Geraldo, with a mocking tone. "And what else? Shall she be a muse and a virgin martyr as well? Be careful, Alvaro. The wings of angels often conceal thorns." But Alvaro was not discouraged. He recounted with details that revealed more emotion than calculation how he had first met Elvira. It had been on an ordinary afternoon when, riding past a small chacara half hidden by shrubbery in the Santo Antonio neighborhood, his eyes fell upon a young woman seated in the garden, lost in thought. There were no words, only a fleeting glance and her swift disappearance among the branches. From that moment on, his soul had been bound to that image. He tried to see her again. He would pass by on foot, pretending to stroll, drop books near the gate, or greet the empty air in the hope she might appear. And then, one day, fate intervened. Elvira dropped a handkerchief. The gate was open. He entered, picked it up, returned it to her, and in that simple gesture, his adoration was sealed. From that moment, I no longer knew whether I dreamed or lived, Alvaro confessed. She did not invite me in, nor offer me a seat, but her smile was warmer than any welcome. The story unfolded, and with it, the fascination of his listeners. But not all were convinced. One suggested that this mysterious woman might be an impostor, a fortune hunter. Another, that the man who accompanied her, whom Alvaro identified as her father, Don Anselmo, might not be so. Rumors, doubts, suspicions, all spun a shadow around the brilliance of Elvira's beauty. Alvaro, indignant, defended her honor with almost painful passion. "Criminals? Never!" he declared, his eyes ablaze. "I can feel the nobility in her every gesture. If she hides her past, it is because pain lies behind it, not mystery, not guilt, but a wound that still bleeds." Despite his efforts, it had been difficult to convince her to attend the ball. Elvira resisted with the firmness of one who knows the danger of being seen. Alvaro then devised a desperate strategy. He told her that her isolation was arousing suspicion, even among the authorities. It was not true, but the lie worked. Out of pride, fear, or necessity, she agreed. And when Elvira entered the salon on Alvaro's arm and accompanied by Don Anselmo, the murmur was immediate. Conversations ceased for an instant. Eyes turned toward her as though drawn by an invisible magnet. Elvira, dressed with a simplicity that seemed only to enhance her natural beauty, advanced with dignity. She wore a white gown with delicate lace trimmings, no jewels, no fan, only a flower in her hair, and a small beauty mark on her right cheek that, far from diminishing her charm, seemed a celestial seal. The men were captivated. One whispered, "She has Andalusian eyes." Another, "She walks like a queen." Even Dr. Geraldo, so skeptical minutes before, admitted to himself that he had never seen a more beautiful woman. But not all eyes looked with admiration. In a corner of the salon, a group of ladies whispered with a very different tone. "Who might that woman be whom Alvaro brought on his arm?" asked Doña Laura, her voice dripping with curiosity. "I do not know," answered Doña Rosalina, "but she does not seem to be from this land. There is something strange about her. And her dress is so poor," added another. "That fabric is not from Paris, I assure you." Their criticisms were veiled as remarks, their questions as insinuations. Some found fault in her makeup, others in her posture. And of course, the beauty mark became subject of debate. "That black spot looks more like a fly than a beauty mark," one said with scorn. "If I had such a thing, I would remove it at once." "Well, I think it is charming," another countered. "It gives her a unique air." "Of course you would," replied Doña Laura with a poisoned smile. "You have one too, don't you?" The group dissolved among fans and low laughter, heading toward the salon with the firm intention of inspecting Elvira more closely. Not to greet her, but to dissect her with their eyes, as one examines a jewel suspected of being false. Meanwhile, Elvira stood in the center of the social storm like a white flower in the midst of a gale. She greeted politely, thanked with a nod, but spoke no more than necessary. Her eyes swept the room without resting on anyone. There was in her a calm that was not indifference, but restraint, a strength that was not pride, but memory. And Alvaro, at her side, could not stop gazing at her. He knew that each step Elvira took was a silent battle, that beneath that serene appearance pulsed a past he did not know, but sensed was full of shadows. And still, He loved her with the irrational certainty of one who needs no proof to surrender his soul. The salon continued to whirl with waltzes, conversations and rumors, but something had changed since Elvira's arrival. It was as though the night had acquired another perfume, another light, another rhythm, and in the midst of it all, a name began to pass from lip to lip: Elvira. A name repeated with wonder, with desire, with envy, with suspicion. And from that night on, none in Recife would ever pronounce it again without feeling, at least once, that there was something in her not entirely of this world. Álvaro de Sá belonged to that rare lineage of men whom fortune and nature seemed to have showered with every gift. The sole heir of a wealthy and distinguished family, at 25, he was already the master of a vast fortune, orphaned of both father and mother, and respected alike in aristocratic circles and among the cafes of thinkers. His slender figure, refined manners, and that noble, serene expression of his face made him stand out not so much for physical beauty, which he possessed without ostentation, but for that presence only found in elevated spirits. He had attempted to follow the career of law, driven not by professional ambition, but by the desire to understand the rules that governed his world. Yet he soon grew disillusioned. The cold academic dissertations and the complexities of positive law stifled him. Álvaro was a man of broad thought, utopian vision, and sharp sensitivity. He preferred debates on justice, politics, and society to the obsolete codes of a legality designed to preserve the privileges of a few. He called himself a liberal, a republican, almost a socialist, and as such, a radical abolitionist. As soon as he inherited his parents' estate, he shed the chains binding the slaves under his name. But he did not do so carelessly. Álvaro knew well the dangers of suddenly freeing those who had been shaped in submission. Thus he organized, on one of his haciendas, an agricultural colony where the former slaves could work the land as tenants, under common discipline, and with the chance to save and prosper. He entrusted the management to a just yet strict administrator, and although the measure was regarded with suspicion by some neighbors, the results soon spoke for themselves. Álvaro was called eccentric. Like an English lord who had adopted the sobriety of a Quaker, he dressed with neatness, spoke calmly, and never raised his voice. His manner with women was always gallant, yet reserved. He loved beauty, art, and luxury, but had never given his heart. He awaited something more. He awaited her. And when he met Elvira, something inside him trembled. That feeling, at first undefined, grew with each encounter. Soon, Álvaro spoke of her with an enthusiasm bordering on the poetic. The ladies of Recife began to murmur, who was this unknown woman who had stolen the attention of the city's most sought-after bachelor? Elvira was modest, quiet, of uncertain origin, and yet it was enough that she entered the salon on her father's arm for every gaze to settle on her. She dressed simply. Her attire was neither the most expensive nor the most elaborate, but on her figure everything seemed harmonious. The light fabric, without embroidery or lace, fell naturally upon her slender form. She wore no jewels, no fan, no rehearsed mannerisms, and yet her walk was regal. Her face, though shy, radiated a purity difficult to describe. The most beautiful young ladies of the salon paled with envy. They smiled, yes, but their eyes were daggers sheathed in silk. Elvira felt it. She sensed the whispers behind the fans, the eyes that scanned her with a mixture of mockery and fear. And in the midst of the salon's splendor, she felt small. On her forehead, a word burned that she believed written in indelible ink: slave. She clung to her father's arm and drew him into an adjoining room, seeking air, shadow, refuge. "Father, I cannot stay," she murmured, her voice breaking. "I cannot breathe. This light, these laughs, this world is not mine. I'm committing a crime by being here, as if deceiving them all with my presence. If they knew who I am..." Miguel took her hands, firmly yet tenderly. "No one knows, daughter. No one could imagine it. You walk like a lady. You speak like a lady, and even true ladies pale beside you. Do not fear. This will be the last time. Just tonight, and then we leave." "Leave again," she whispered sadly. "How many times more, Father? How many lands must we abandon? This city, these people? For once I have felt something like happiness, and already I must say farewell." Miguel lowered his gaze. He had no answer. Then Alvaro's voice broke into the dim room, bright and cheerful. "Ah, here you are," he said with a smile. "Lady Elvira, your absence has been felt like an eclipse. Everyone asks for you, but more than that, I have a request. Will you sing for us?" Elvira turned pale once more. "To sing in the midst of that hostile crowd? I cannot," she stammered. "I am no artist, and I would die of shame. I have heard you. I know what your voice can awaken. I would not ask this if I did not believe in you. I beg only one song, the one you sang the other day, the song of the slave. That song," her eyes clouded, "it fills me with sorrow. Perhaps that is why it is so beautiful in your voice." Elvira closed her eyes. She breathed deeply. She remembered her father's words. She remembered Alvaro's dreams. And then she nodded. She allowed herself to be led to the piano. The salon fell silent. The musicians stepped aside. The gentlemen drew nearer. The ladies held their breath. Elvira sat with elegance, and for an instant all else vanished. Her fingers brushed the keys timidly. The first chords were uncertain, but then her voice emerged, sweet, clear, painful, as if every note were woven with invisible tears. She sang with her soul bare, with her heart open. She sang as though it were her only way of existing. And the salon listened. The laughter faded. The smiles disappeared. No one moved. No one dared breathe. A lady shed a tear, then another, and another, and when the last note ended, the silence was absolute. Until the applause burst forth, Alvaro closed his eyes. Geraldo, his friend, leaned toward another gentleman and murmured, "A voice like that cannot belong to an ordinary woman. She is an artist, a queen." Alvaro was right. Elvira, exhausted, sank beside her father. But then Alvaro approached once more. "Do not forget your promise," he said gently. "This quadrille is mine." And she, though trembling, smiled. She took his arm, and together they went to the center of the salon, where for that night Elvira was queen. Just a few hours before the grand ball at the Baroness's house, while the city still slept and the first rays of sunlight barely touched Recife's rooftops, ISAURA could no longer hide the weight of her truth. Seated by the window, her gaze lost and her soul torn, she felt that the disguise protecting her was also consuming her from within. Miguel, silent, watched her from the doorway. He knew that her apparent calm hid a storm, and that his daughter could not sustain much longer the lie that allowed them to breathe. ISAURA closed her eyes for a moment, seeking in the dimness of her memory the strength she once had. Her reflection in the glass did not show Elvira, the young woman of aristocratic manners admired in the salons. What she saw was ISAURA, daughter of silence, of suffering, of secrecy. Miguel, steady at the door, knew they could no longer sustain the lie. Not because they had yet been discovered, no, not yet, but because emotions had begun to betray them. ISAURA had been raised as a lady, yes. She had learned to speak with elegance, to carry herself with nobility, to play the piano as well as the finest. And if she could walk among nobles and ladies without arousing suspicion, it was because her education had been meticulous, her language refined, her conduct impeccable, worthy of the most polished academies. Her spirit, superior by nature, still shone beneath the veil of her origin, but none of that erased the mark destiny had branded upon her at birth. It was desperation that drove Miguel to an extreme decision. The memory of ISAURA's mother's tragic fate tormented him day and night. He knew Leoncio was even more merciless than his father, and that once in his hands, ISAURA would find no mercy at all. With the hope of buying her freedom already lost, Miguel resolved to use the money he had gathered with such sacrifice to snatch her from that hell. The means no longer mattered. In the world's eyes, helping a slave escape was an abominable crime, unworthy of an honest man. But to Miguel, she was no slave. She was his beloved daughter, a jewel of purity on the verge of being defiled by impious hands. The law could condemn him, but his conscience would not. He thought of appealing to the authorities, of denouncing the abuse, of begging for protection, but everyone told him the same. Do not get involved. The authorities do not interfere in the affairs of the rich. If you are lucky, you will only pay the costs. If not, you may end up in prison. The poor, they said, never prevail against the powerful. Miguel still kept secret ties with former slaves of the hacienda, who, grateful for his fair and humane management, continued to respect and support him. Through them, he learned of ISAURA's ordeal after the commander's death. Without hesitation, he prepared everything for their flight. The very night he managed to free her, they boarded a vessel commanded by a Portuguese captain, an old friend. The ship was bound for Africa, but left them in Pernambuco. The captain promised to return in a few months, ready to take them wherever they wished. Miguel, a man of the land, limited by a life among gardens and fields, did not comprehend the full extent of the risk. He believed it was enough to move to another province and remain anonymous. He never imagined the number of resources a master could wield to recapture a slave. He was convinced they could live in peace, at least for a while. ISAURA, though more lucid, also felt safe. Far from her tormentor, she began to breathe, to dream, to live. But that calm was brief. Everything changed the day she met Alvaro. She loved him from the first moment with the burning force of one who has loved but once. Alvaro possessed a natural charm, his voice, his gestures, his gaze. Everything about him was noble, kind, magnetic. For ISAURA, resistance was impossible. She loved him with the naive passion of a pure heart, without weighing the consequences, without thinking of her condition. And that made her situation all the more painful. She knew her love was impossible. The abyss separating them was unfathomable. And yet, she could not stop dreaming. It pained her enough to deceive society, but to deceive Alvaro, that was intolerable. If he discovered the truth, could he forgive her? Would he not have the right to despise her, humiliate her, trample her for having deceived him? No, I cannot go on like this, she told herself in anguish. I must no longer hide the truth from him. He must know who I am, that he cannot love me, that he must not. But each time she tried to speak, courage abandoned her. The words stuck in her throat, frozen by fear. It was enough for Alvaro to look at her tenderly for all her resolve to dissolve. She prolonged the lie another day, and another. She lived on illusion, like the condemned allowed a crown for a few hours before returning to the dungeon. One single night of bliss, she thought. Was it not just to allow herself that before returning to the abyss? Thus, amid doubts and fears, they came to accept, almost without intending, a ball invitation. Alvaro had insisted with such fervor that even Miguel could not refuse. ISAURA, though silent, did not object, and both took her silence as consent. But they were mistaken. That very night, ISAURA broke down. "Father, I will not go to that ball. I cannot, I must not," she said with trembling lips, her face pale. Miguel stared at her in shock. "And why did you not say so earlier, when Alvaro was still here? We have already given our word." "There is still a remedy, Father," she insisted. "Go to him and tell him everything. Tell him who I am. Tell him the truth." Miguel turned pale. "Are you mad? Do you want them to lock you up, chain you, and return you to your master? As long as I live, as long as I have a drop of strength left, I will fight to protect you, but not with a confession that will condemn us both." "And lying to him? Presenting myself as a free lady, when I am nothing but a fugitive slave? Is that not an outrage? A betrayal?" Miguel moved, tried to reason with her. "No one will ever know. Tomorrow, if possible, we will leave. We will go to the United States. We will work and live with dignity, but we must go to the ball. It is a necessary masquerade." ISAURA did not answer. She felt each of her father's words sink her deeper, and yet they also seemed reasonable. How could she leave without seeing Alvaro once more, without hearing his voice, touching his hand, bidding farewell? After long minutes of silence, she approached Miguel and said, "I will go, Father, but I will go like the victim who walks to sacrifice among songs and flowers." "A dark foreboding?" Miguel asked softly. "Yes, something tells me this night will bring misfortune." Miguel stroked her hair, trying to smile. "I, on the other hand, am certain this ball will be our salvation." The salon was still adorned with light and music, but its former splendor was slowly beginning to fade, like a flower that, though it keeps its shape, has already lost its fragrance. The musicians continued their melodies, and the lamps still burned with the same intensity, yet the atmosphere had turned dense, almost opaque. Something intangible floated in the air, a tension that did not belong to the visible world, but that every sensitive heart could feel. ISAURA, with her forehead held high and the serenity of one who struggles not to falter, stood in the middle of the salon. She had decided to attend that ball not out of vanity nor desire for glory, but because of a chain of circumstances beyond her will. She had accepted the invitation like one who walks toward the scaffold, not from cowardice, but from the need to face the inevitable. Her conscience, always scrupulous, followed close behind her like a stern shadow, reminding her with each step that her presence there was a dangerous lie. And yet, there she was, standing, beautiful, dazzling. The evening's first moments had enveloped her in a cloud of charm, but that spell was gradually dissolving. The gazes that once praised her were now turning harsh, inquisitive, not from suspicion, but from jealousy. The ladies, who at first had received her with diplomatic smiles, now avoided her presence. Some whispered among themselves with obvious disdain, others withdrew with excuses of a headache or sudden fatigue. ISAURA was becoming, without intending it, the central figure of an unspoken drama. Every compliment Alvaro gave her was an arrow straight to the hearts of those who had hoped to become his wife. Some bit their lips, others cast glances cold as ice, and at least one left the salon with wounded dignity. Female jealousy, fed by vanity and humiliation, had replaced the lively chatter with a tense, broken murmur. Yet not all faces wore masks of envy. Among the attendees were also women of noble spirit, able to recognize merit and beauty without feeling threatened. They, seeing ISAURA, did not limit themselves to murmurs or criticism. Rather, they looked at her with sincere admiration. One of them, silver-haired and of majestic bearing, even approached ISAURA with an elegant compliment. "Señorita Elvira, your presence has restored to this salon a brilliance long unseen," she said with a serene smile. Thanks to such gestures, the ball did not collapse entirely. Then a quadrille was announced. Encouraged by the kind gesture and Alvaro's warm invitation, ISAURA accepted. She took his hand and allowed herself to be led to the center of the salon, where the dancers were gathering. The practiced, graceful steps flowed in harmony, and for a few moments ISAURA breathed again, as though the world were perfect. Yet far from there, in an adjoining room, a silent danger was brewing. In a secluded chamber, where the curtains were heavy and the light dim, several young men had gathered. Far from sharing the enthusiasm of the ball, they preferred cards and wine. They were students, some of law, others of medicine, and all without exception of skeptical spirit and frivolous conduct. They laughed among themselves, mocking the salon's formalities, and wagered on who would spill wine first on his new coat. Among them was an older man, with a severe face and coarse manners, Martinho. He did not entirely belong to the circle, but was tolerated for his skill at cards and peculiar cunning. He bore the look of one who carves his way through life without scruples, eyes ever fixed on gain, soul hardened by ambition. That night, however, Martinho was not interested in lansquenet, nor in the dice. His attention was fixed on a folded paper carefully tucked into his inner pocket. "Not playing, Martinho?" one of the youths asked. "I'm engaged in a more profitable game," he replied, without looking away from the paper. "More profitable than winning our coins?" Martinho smiled with malice. 5,000 rays. What do you think of that? The others exchanged intrigued looks. One of them snatched the paper from his hands before he could prevent it. He unfolded it clumsily and read aloud, "Reward. Wanted. The slave ISAURA, about 18 years of age, very light complexion, almond-shaped eyes, chestnut hair, refined education, pleasant voice, music and singing. Distinguishing mark. A mole on the left cheek. Reward of 5,000 rays to anyone providing information leading to her capture. Signed, Leoncio Almeida." Silence filled the room. The laughter died instantly, as though the mention of that name had summoned a ghost. Everyone present, without exception, remembered Elvira, the young woman dazzling the salon that very night. "It can't be," muttered one, pale. "Elvira is no slave," declared another, shaking his head. "And what if she is?" Martino insinuated, taking back the paper and folding it carefully. "Look closely at her. The description is exact. A mole on the left cheek, refined education, noble bearing." The students leapt to their feet and slipped discreetly toward the door leading into the main hall. They positioned themselves in a corner from which they could observe the dance floor. There she was, radiant, dancing with Alvaro. Her harmonious profile, her noble posture, and, yes, the mole, subtle but visible, on her left cheek. "It's her," one said quietly. "There's no doubt." Martino nodded, satisfied. His expression was that of one who has just found a gold mine. He put the notice away with care, as though afraid the paper might vanish. "I will return her to her master," he announced coldly. "And with those 5,000, I'll leave this life of mediocrity behind." The young men looked at him with disgust. "You're a wretch," murmured one. "I would pay to be her slave before betraying her like that." "And since when do we sell women for money?" added another, indignant. "What sort of man does that?" Martino did not answer. He left with firm steps, leaving behind him a trail of indignation and fear. No one knew where he was headed, but all sensed that his next move would change the course of the night. One of the students, more thoughtful than the rest, remained silent. He watched ISAURA dancing with a serene smile, unaware of the abyss opening beneath her feet. "They say she is a slave," he murmured at last. "But I see a queen." Another nodded, gazing in the same direction. "Perhaps in her dwells more nobility than in many of the free ladies we have known." And while the salon continued to whirl to the rhythm of music, the most dreaded secret was beginning to take shape, silent, devastating, and perhaps impossible to stop. The murmur of conversations had begun to dissipate into the farthest corners of the grand salon when Alvaro, driven by a force he could no longer contain, took Elvira by the hand and led her into an adjoining room. There, beneath the dim glow of candelabras, the storm of emotions consuming him inside could not be betrayed by the subdued light. He closed the door carefully, as though in doing so he might also shut out everything threatening to come between them. ISAURA, confused and trembling, lowered her eyes. He encircled her gently, still holding her hand, and spoke with a voice uneven, laden with tenderness and resolve. "Elvira, I can no longer remain silent. What I feel for you is neither fleeting nor capricious. It pierces my soul, gives meaning even to my darkest days. I love you, and I care nothing for your origin, your name, nor what the world may say. I want you to be my wife." ISAURA felt the world come to a halt. The confession she had so often dreamed of hearing was now real, but with it came the certainty of tragedy. Her heart beat wildly, torn between longing and dread. Before she could respond, a shudder coursed through her as she glimpsed, through one of the half-open windows, the unmistakable figure of Martino, lurking with a paper in his hand and a malicious smile twisting his lips. Fear seized her like a merciless shadow. She staggered back, and only Alvaro's firm arm kept her from collapsing. "Are you unwell?" he asked, alarmed. "No, it's nothing," she stammered, struggling to steady her trembling voice. "Only a touch of dizziness. Perhaps it's the salon's air. Come, let us return slowly," Alvaro proposed, never ceasing to gaze at her with tenderness. Isaura nodded faintly, and together they returned to the ballroom. The music still played, but the joy that had once filled the atmosphere seemed drained of its vigor. She accepted to dance one last quadrille, though now without smile or enthusiasm. She moved like a ghost draped in silks, her steps guided more by duty than desire. Martinho's eyes followed her from the shadows, a constant threat, and each step of the dance seemed a prelude to inevitable ruin. When the music ended, Alvaro guided her to a corner of the salon, his heart still alight with the fire of his declaration. "May I know your answer, Elvira?" he asked softly, his voice threaded with hope. "Do not deny me the joy of having you at my side." Isaura met his gaze, and in his eyes she saw a love so pure, so sincere, that she felt unworthy of it. A tear rolled down her cheek. "I love you, Alvaro, but it is impossible," she whispered, her voice breaking with sorrow. Before he could reply, Martinho approached with determined steps and a booming voice. "Pardon me, Senor Alvaro. I must speak with the young woman at your arm." Alvaro turned, irritated by the intrusion. "And who are you to interrupt in this manner?" "My name does not matter. What matters is that this young lady, everyone here knows as Elvira, is not who she claims to be. She is a fugitive slave, and I am here to reclaim her by law." A murmur swept through the salon like a crashing wave. Isaura blanched at once. Alvaro stared in disbelief. "Are you mad? Who paid you to slander her like this? What vile game is this?" "I need no approval," Martinho retorted smugly, pulling the notice from his pocket. "I bring proof. Here is the official poster for a runaway slave named ISAURA." He unfolded the paper and began to read aloud, heedless of the crowd now gathering around them. "Wanted. Slave by the name of ISAURA, about 18 years of age, white complexion, dark eyes, sweet voice, educated in music and letters. Mark of identification, a mole by the left cheek and a faint scar upon the chest. Of distinguished manners, expresses herself with refinement." Faces in the salon turned to astonishment. Many eyes shifted to Isaura, as though each word of the notice confirmed what had seemed impossible. Drunk with his own sense of power, Martinho reached out, intent on unbuttoning Isaura's bodice. "Hold there!" Alvaro shouted, instantly stepping between them, fists clenched. "Not one step further, scoundrel." Isaura, feeling exposed and humiliated, struggled for breath. Her eyes scanned the crowd, searching for compassion. She found only shock, judgment, or disdain. "Enough!" she cried, her voice rising in desperate courage. "Yes, it is true. I am Isaura. I am a slave." A sepulchral silence seized the salon. No one moved. Isaura's confession was like a stone thrown into still waters. It shattered everything. Suddenly her eyes closed, her body gave way, and she collapsed into Alvaro's arms. Miguel, who had already come close, helped to support her. Together, they carried her away amid whispers and scandalized stares. The salon, moments before alive with laughter and dance, was now a grim chamber corroded by social judgment. Some ladies, once consumed by envy, smiled with cruel satisfaction, now assured of their moral superiority over the woman who had eclipsed them. Others, nobler in spirit, felt shame for having despised her without cause. Several gentlemen, ignoring the scandal, spoke out indignantly. "A slave, and what of it?" one said. "She is more a lady than many who parade here with ostentatious surnames. I would give anything to take her as my wife," another affirmed solemnly. Martinho, triumphant, demanded his reward. He produced a legal mandate, and an officer of justice appeared at his side, ready to enforce it. "I demand the surrender of the slave," he declared with triumph. Alvaro, still cradling Isaura's unconscious body, looked upon him with contempt. "She will not be handed over as though she were an object. I offer myself as her guarantor. I will take her myself before whoever claims her, but only when she is in condition." The officer, shaken by the presence of the young nobleman and the crowd's indignation, assented weakly. The multitude began to hiss and jeer at Martinho, hurling words that branded him greedy and cowardly. Martinho, furious, stuffed the crumpled paper back into his pocket and withdrew amid insults and mockery. He clenched his teeth, knowing the 5,000 rays were slipping from his grasp. The once majestic hall now seemed a cavern of judgment. The candles flared like tongues, consuming everything. Alvaro and Miguel left the place carrying ISAURA, and with them vanished the beauty that had given meaning to that night. No one danced again, and in the air lingered a stigma that no dawn would erase. A month had passed since that night when social masks fell, exposing the cruelest face of prejudice. The scandal of the ball, far from dissipating with the days, still echoed like an uncomfortable murmur through the salons and corridors of high society. But far from those cold lights and venomous tongues, in the Santo Antonio district, ISAURA remained cloistered in the small house where life for the moment allowed her a breath. It was a modest dwelling, yet clean, quiet, and wrapped in a blooming garden that Miguel tended with care. Thanks to Alvaro's influence, ISAURA and her former overseer were allowed to remain undisturbed. Still, the shadow of fear stretched over their days. They lived as if in a held breath, like one listening for footsteps in the hall and fearing that the next knock on the door might be the executioner of the law. Alvaro visited almost every day. He always arrived at dusk, when the sun stained the whitewashed walls with gold and the scent of jasmine mingled with the evening breeze. Sometimes he brought news, other times flowers or new sheet music for ISAURA, but in truth, more than news or gifts, he brought comfort. His mere presence filled that secluded corner of the world with hope. Sometimes the three of them spoke together in the parlor. At other times, he and ISAURA remained alone, sharing silences and glances that spoke more than words. One clear afternoon, when the days of September had begun to lose their chill, Alvaro arrived accompanied by a young gentleman with a lively face and affable smile. It was Dr. Geraldo, his lifelong friend, who had just returned from a journey inland. Not finding Alvaro at his residence, he rightly guessed he would find him there. "My friend," Geraldo greeted enthusiastically upon seeing him. "I was beginning to think you had hidden yourself away in an enchanted grotto." Alvaro laughed openly, and after clasping his hand, invited him inside. "Come then, I shall introduce you to the muse who inhabits this grotto." With all the naturalness of one who has nothing to hide, he led him to the main room. The space, though simple, held a harmony that disarmed even the most hostile spirit. White curtains swayed with the breeze. The walls bore floral hand-painted adornments, and in one corner rested an old clavichord, witness to many nights of shared music. ISAURA came forward, dressed in a modest sky-blue gown with no jewels, no pretension, yet dignity in every gesture. Her serene gaze and gentle voice were enough for Geraldo to understand that this woman was far more than just a story whispered through the halls of power. "No wonder you've turned hermit," he teased as they sat in the parlor. "The lady of song and silence has you captive." Alvaro, unashamed, looked at him gravely. "I am no captive, Geraldo. I am where I chose to be, and if you knew everything, you would understand that this woman is worth more than all the nobility of this country." Geraldo fell silent, surprised by the firmness in his friend's tone. Then, with a kind gesture, he asked to speak with Alvaro alone. They stepped out to the corridor covered with wisteria, where the murmur of the wind among the leaves could still be heard. "So, it is her?" Geraldo asked in a low voice. "The same young woman from the ball, the slave?" "Yes, the very one all praised before knowing her origin, and whom they then sought to despise. But neither defines her. ISAURA is more than a social scandal. She is an admirable woman, and I love her." Geraldo studied him intently. Alvaro continued, "At first, I felt betrayed. Not by her, but by fate. Yet when I saw her fall, trembling with shame, defending her dignity with more honor than many free men, I understood that I was the one who must rise to her height. It was then I resolved that I would do everything possible to free her, not out of pity, out of justice, and out of love." Geraldo sighed. "And have you tried?" "I wrote to Señor Leoncio, offering him a considerable sum for her freedom. I begged him to accept. out of humanity, out of reason. And this is what he answered. He drew a crumpled envelope from the inside pocket of his frock coat and handed it to Geraldo. The latter opened it, read, and raised his brows at the contents. "It is offensive," he murmured. "But, unfortunately, he is right in law. She remains his property. And do you not see the atrocity that means? Of course I do, but the law is the law, and it was made by men who fear losing their privileges." Alvaro rose restlessly. He paced back and forth, his brow furrowed. If laws protect injustice, then it is the duty of a just man to rebel. I cannot resign myself to lose her because of a paper. ISAURA is not a commodity. She is a human being, a soul that has suffered, endured, loved without rancor. "You are brave," said Geraldo sincerely, "and perhaps a little reckless. But I do not blame you. Never have I seen you speak so about any woman, because none was like her." A long silence followed. The wind swept a few dry leaves across the threshold. Then, with a more somber tone, Alvaro added, "If I give up ISAURA, I give up myself." At that moment, the creak of the patio door was heard. Alvaro's coachman, pale-faced, appeared at the entrance. "Senor, there are 2 men asking for you. They say it is urgent. One seems to be an officer of justice." Geraldo discreetly parted a curtain and peered through the window. "I do not like their look," he said, "nor the sound of their boots. This smells of a summons." Alvaro's face hardened. He rose slowly and smoothed the cuffs of his shirt. "Tell them the master of this house will receive them. Myself." And as he walked toward the door, with firm step and heavy heart, he knew that peace had been nothing but a mirage. The battle for ISAURA was far from over, and the worst, perhaps, was only just beginning. Ever since the public humiliation at the ballroom had ignited the fire of vengeance in his chest, Martinho had found no peace. The stifled laughter, the looks of scorn, and the failure of his mission haunted him like a shadow. His pride, wounded and battered, burned fiercer than ever, and the desire to vindicate himself before his master and before his own conscience drove him to write with urgency. That night, by the light of an oil lamp, he soaked every word of a long letter to Leoncio in venom. He boasted of having unmasked ISAURA, despite her elegant attire and refined manners. With deliberate falsehood, he painted her life as a comedy of deception and debauchery, claiming that Miguel profited from his daughter's beauty, presenting her as a decorative ornament to young men of high society. He accused Alvaro of having made her his mistress, and insisted that everything in that house, from the tablecloth to the gestures, was a farce. He concluded his letter by warning that young Alvaro, relying on his name and influence, had prevented him from fulfilling his duty. Leoncio's reply did not delay. From his estate in Rio de Janeiro, his hatred spilled across the page. His words were steeped in jealousy, rancor, and a blind will to possess. He ignored Alvaro's recent offer to buy ISAURA's freedom, mocking his naivete and calling him a sentimental fool. Instead of negotiating, he sent Martinho a letter of recommendation, legal powers, and explicit authorization to capture ISAURA wherever she might be found. He even enclosed a note addressed to the chief of police, demanding immediate cooperation. Martinho, with documents in hand and a twisted smile on his lips, went straight to the police headquarters. The commissioner, a stern man little inclined to question orders, read the instructions in silence. There was nothing he could do against the legitimacy of the papers. Without delay, he issued a warrant for ISAURA's arrest and assigned a justice officer accompanied by 2 guards. The small caravan set off toward the Santo Antonio house, certain that this time they would not fail. When Alvaro saw them approach, his body tensed like a rope about to snap. He immediately recognized the arrogance in Martinho's posture, the contempt in his gaze, and the provocative tone with which he demanded ISAURA's immediate surrender. Alvaro's restrained fury cut through his words like knives as he reminded them that Miguel and ISAURA were under his legal protection, recognized by the mayor himself. With mockery, Martinho presented the warrant signed by the chief of police. "Geraldo, an unwilling witness to the confrontation, tried to calm his friend, urging prudence in the face of the authorities' presence. But Alvaro, his face flushed with indignation, denounced Martinho as vile, a dog for hire who obeyed without conscience, a man incapable of seeing ISAURA as a woman, only as an object to be dragged back into chains. The atmosphere became suffocating. Then, in an unexpected turn, Alvaro asked to speak with Martinho privately. He led him to his study and firmly shut the door. On the desk, he placed a pouch of coins. 10,000 reis. Twice the amount Leoncio might have offered for ISAURA's capture. The proposal was clear: abandon the commission and retract his claims. Martinho feigned offense, placed a hand on his chest, muttered words of dignity, but his eyes gleamed with greed. After brief negotiation, he agreed. He would claim he had mistaken her identity, that the young woman was not ISAURA, that the ballroom lights and makeup had misled him. He would even add absurd arguments, saying the real ISAURA bore a scar on her left hand, while this young lady showed no such mark. Alvaro allowed a bitter smile. "How ingenious," he murmured, fully aware he was merely buying a little time. But time was precious, and for it he was willing to pay any price. With the coins already in his pocket, Martinho promised to deliver a new report to the chief of police, denying his earlier suspicions. He would also write to Leoncio, claiming he had been mistaken, and suggesting that the real ISAURA had perhaps fled to another province. He left satisfied, convinced that he could still profit later from this game of lies. As soon as the door closed behind him, Geraldo burst out, "Have you lost your mind, Alvaro? To buy the silence of a scoundrel, to make yourself complicit in a falsehood?" Alvaro, calm, looked at him with the intensity of one who has crossed a point of no return. "I did not buy silence," he replied. "I bought justice, the kind the law denies me. I'm not protecting a slave. I'm protecting a woman who deserves to be free. You are behaving like a criminal, like a concealer of fugitives," Geraldo retorted, disappointment heavy in his voice. "Do you not see the abyss you are stepping toward?" "I care nothing for the abyss," Alvaro said, a restrained fire in his eyes. "If loving ISAURA is a crime, then let them judge me for that love. I would rather bear the guilt of defending her than the shame of having abandoned her." Geraldo stared at him for a long moment. In his eyes lay a mixture of admiration and sorrow. Admiration for his courage, sorrow for the blindness of a heart consumed by love. "This will cost you more than money, Alvaro. You shall see," he murmured before leaving. The young man remained alone, his spirit unbowed, his gaze fixed on the door through which Martinho had gone. That man would return with a useful lie, but the threat had not vanished. It had merely disguised itself, as danger so often does in courts and the corridors of justice. In the adjoining room, ISAURA sat quietly at her embroidery, unaware of the price her freedom had already begun to exact. And Alvaro, his heart pounding in his chest like a war drum, knew the battle was far from over. It had only just begun. The room lay in shadows, silent, as if even the air itself were holding its breath. The voices that had moments earlier resounded with violence had faded, and only Alvaro remained, seated at the table, elbows resting on the wood, his face buried in his hands. A dull desolation enveloped him, heavy as a shroud. Martinho's words still thundered in his mind, but they were not what disturbed him most. It was the sense of impotence, of finding no path to save ISAURA, that was breaking him apart. He loved that woman with all his soul, with a love he no longer knew how to conceal. And yet, every gesture of tenderness that sprang from his heart shattered against the cruel wall of reality. ISAURA was a slave. Her freedom hung by a thread, at the whim of a man, an unjust law, an executioner whose face had not yet been revealed, but who was undoubtedly drawing near. The minutes dragged by. Then he heard the faint sound of soft footsteps in the adjoining room. ISAURA appeared, hesitant. She had waited until the house had quieted, until the visitors had departed. Silence had beckoned her from her hiding place, and her heart beat with both fear and hope. "Señor Alvaro," she whispered timidly. not daring to approach fully. "Forgive me if I disturb you. Perhaps you wish to be alone." He raised his gaze slowly. His eyes, though clouded by inner storms, lit faintly at the sight of her. "My ISAURA, you never disturb me. On the contrary, your presence soothes my soul. Come." She advanced cautiously, as if each step were a question. But standing before him, she furrowed her brow slightly. "I see you troubled. Did something happen? A moment ago I thought I heard raised voices. Did someone bring you bad news?" "No, it was nothing important," he replied, trying to deflect the weight of his concern. "Some men came looking for Dr. Geraldo, nothing more." ISAURA lowered her gaze, unconvinced. Then she slowly sat beside him. "Even so, your face speaks louder than your words. I know it already. Something weighs on you, Senor Alvaro." He sighed deeply, seeming for a moment to wrestle with whether to speak. At last, in a low voice, he murmured, "I was thinking of the means to lift you from the abyss into which you were cast, of how to free you from this slavery you do not deserve, and restore you to the place that is rightfully yours. For you were created for freedom, for joy, for the noblest gifts life can offer." ISAURA held her breath. Her heart trembled. "No, do not say that. Do not torment yourself for my sake. I do not deserve so much. I am a wretch marked by fate. It is not worth fighting what has been written." "How can you speak so?" he said, bitterness in his voice. "Do you value my love, my struggle, so little? I am not even worthy to hear that word from your lips. Keep your love for one who deserves it. I am only a slave who deceived you, who hid her condition, who caused you pain and shame. ISAURA, enough. Do not say that again. The fault was mine. I dragged you to that ball. I was ignorant of your reality. You only took the hardest path, that of silence. I do not judge you. I beg you, for what we feel, for our love." The words, "our love," made ISAURA lift her eyes, wet, vulnerable. "It should not be called that. It is a sad love, a hopeless love. Yet still, I love it. I have loved you from the beginning, and your tenderness, your respect, were the only beautiful things I had in my life. I clung to that. I felt less a slave, less degraded, when I thought that someone like you looked at me with affection. That is why I kept silent, for fear of losing everything." Alvaro closed his eyes, overcome. His voice broke as he replied, "Do not speak to me with a humility that does not belong to you. Do not speak to me as a slave. You are more worthy than any lady of society I have ever known. If I once loved you for your beauty and sweetness, today I love you more for your courage, your suffering, your light. If you love me, then no barriers remain. The rest, I will tear down. But, Senor, what use is this love? What use if I cannot even be legally your slave, if I belong to another, if I must die in the hands of the one who owns me?" "Never!" he exclaimed, leaping to his feet. "My fortune, my honor, my name, all I will sacrifice to save you from that fate. If the law does not aid me, I will bring justice with my own hands. God is witness to my vow." "No, please," she whispered, trembling. "Do not sacrifice yourself for me. It is enough to know that you loved me, even if only for a fleeting moment. That memory will suffice me for life. Do not stain your name. Do not abase yourself for someone like me. ISAURA, torment me no more with that word. You are no slave. You never were in my heart. What is a chain imposed by men when God created you free, pure, luminous? I will make the world see it, I promise you." Alvaro spoke with a mixture of tenderness and determination that made the skin prickle. And unable to restrain himself further, driven by an impulse stronger than his will, he extended his arms and, with a reverent, gentle, chaste gesture, drew ISAURA against his chest. They remained thus, suspended in absolute silence, as if time itself had halted. It was their first embrace. A sacred instant that condensed everything contained, everything denied for so long. But fate, which never sleeps, struck once more. A carriage halted before the garden. Then a powerful voice shattered the spell. "Ho! The house!" The shock tore them apart. Isaura stepped back, pale. Alvaro clutched his chest as if pierced by a blade. "It is best you withdraw, Isaura," he said softly. "We do not know who has arrived. It is safer they do not see you." Always interrupted. "Always a burden I am," she murmured before vanishing down the hallway. A moment later, Alvaro's servant entered to announce a visitor. Alvaro straightened, composed his features and waited. The man who stepped in seemed taken from a novel. Young, tall, of distinguished bearing, he dressed with calculated elegance, and his manners were impeccable. Yet in his eyes gleamed a dark fire, a shadow that belied his